Well, welcome to today's ArtSpeak University. This is a department teaching. This is a strategist department. So there's all kinds of phenomenal, creative, wonderful people that help out our clients. But if you are watching this and you are part of a church staff, or you're part of a church team or another organization, maybe another agency, this will apply to you as well as those that are on our team today. And the topic that I'm going to teach today, I'm going to look at the screen, and there's a tremendous amount of creative people. I love this call because it's always constantly reminds me that I am by far the smartest person in the room. On my client calls, I'm never the smartest person, so I'm glad that I have lots of smart, brilliant, very honed in skills, different graces and giftings upon team members. That's, I think, what makes special here. So today, I know oftentimes in this department, there's a lot of things we have shared, which you can go back to watch the recordings in the community on all the very tech specific things, on all of the marketing specific things, the strategic things that we all want to know and dive into, and I learn and grow from as well. Today's going to be very low tech in my approach and the content we're going to share today. And no matter where you are at serving on a church staff, you're leading a department, you're in some kind of creative capacity, maybe even within ArtSpeak, the thing that we all have in common is people. I know we're learning a lot about artificial intelligence, automation, and bots. How can we use technology to communicate and to make communication streamline? And that's going to continue to grow, and it's going to be part of your world. It's constantly going to be a part of my world to learn and to grow. I want to stay on the cutting edge of how we serve people. But that does not remove the responsibility for the interaction and the communication and the connection that we have with people on our team. If we're leading a team, people, if we're on a seat where we are part of a team, or we are serving clients from the outside, there's going to be a level that we have to continue to grow in that skill set as well, because growing and our ability to connect with people is a skill set to be developed. Is not something that you are born with. I know that people on this call, that you're born and your natural inclination is to be extrovert. It's really easy for you to be in a room, and a room full of people. It actually gives you more energy. You can spend hours in a room talking to people. You can leave with a lot more energy. Some of you on this call that you put into those environments, you get 30, 45 minutes in, you're like, I'm drained, I tap out, I'm good with people for the day, and you just want to go somewhere where there isn't people so you can recharge. So regardless of whether you fall in the spectrum, or maybe you're right smack dab in the middle, your personality doesn't dismiss you from growing in your ability to connect with people. We all can grow at the next level. And so what I'm going to share from you today is going to help you do that and grow in a specific way. So today, in our topic for our ArtSpeak University, our strategist team department teaching today, it's going to be very interactive. I definitely want to get some feedback from you guys, but we're going to talk about going from people pleasing to challenging people. Now, how many of you on this call that you would admit that's something that you've either had to overcome, or that's just a tension that you're currently managing, is pleasing people? And you get that feedback, and it just something you really have to wrestle with it, because if it's not really good, positive, amazing feedback, sometimes you have to really wrestle with that. Or it could be not just within ArtSpeak, but it could be right in home life, right? It could be in marriage, it could be with your kids, could be things that maybe you do outside of your team as well. But we all want to be loved, we all want to be recognized, we all want to be affirmed, but we know that that is not life, and that doesn't resonate with every situation. So today we're going to talk about from pleasing people to challenging people, because early on, as a learning to grow as a leader, that was probably my biggest challenge, and the thing that held me back, the potential to hold me back the most in my leadership journey, was pleasing people. So during the early years of ministry, I started out in the fall of 1999, going on staff at my church in my early 20s as a children's pastor, youth pastor, helping to see over our outreach initiatives. So I had a full plate in ministry. And also too, I was in Bible college at the same time. So Bible college at night, full time, 8, 10, 12 hours during the day. I had a pretty full plate. So during those early years, I might have defined my leadership as make people happy and they will follow you. That resonate with anybody? I just make people happy and they will just follow me. And early on, that was great. I was part of a church plant. I was the first pastoral hire outside our senior pastor. So everybody thought it was great to have a youth pastor and a children's pastor and somebody that was going to help grow the family ministries and to be out in the community and make connections and do evangelistic events in the city and all of that kind of stuff. So early years, it was great. I loved the church. People loved me. But as I began to build teams and got to be around a little bit more than a few months, um, is that people would come and say, "Hey, I have an issue with this," from a parent. "Hey, I don't like my son doesn't like this. I'm concerned." Well, great. I'll just go ahead and change that. Well, hey, Pastor Jeremy, um, we just need more attention here. Great. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Absolutely. Hey, we need help here. Great. I'll go ahead and do that. Hey, Jeremy, can I count on you for helping me move on a Saturday? Absolutely. Got your back. You can count on me. And then those boundaries bled into everybody had my phone number. Anybody wanted something from me, I was at your beck and call. You need somebody to pray for you at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was your guy. You needed to call me and say, "Hey, Jeremy, what's the scripture for that? How do I walk through that?" I was your guy. And so I felt that ministry and leadership were simultaneously of making people happy. If I wasn't making people happy, if people were displeased with something I said, something I did, something wasn't performing at the level of their expectations, or it wasn't done in a way where they saw it, I felt like I wasn't doing my job. I must be a bad leader if people have a concern. Must be a bad leader if people get pushback on vision on something that I wanted to do. So I spent the first several years of ministry giving people what they wanted. And so I ended up saying yes to everything, accommodated every person because I needed those people. I was counting on those people. So if I could just tailor a serving schedule that worked perfectly with your schedule, if I could help you make it lighten the load and make life easier for you, that was my early years of ministry. This all came to a crash on May 19th of 2003. I was preaching, it was a Wednesday night. I was preaching youth service, and on my way home, it was 3 days before my wedding. 3 days before my wedding, I was preaching the last youth service before I was transitioning into getting married, going on a honeymoon, going to Maui for a week. And I was driving home that night from youth service about 9 o'clock at night. And this overwhelming rush came over my body of my thoughts racing, my mind racing out of control. I started to sweat all over, a sensation that I had never felt in my entire life. I remember, do I pull over? Do I drive home? I'm just one exit away. I couldn't control my thoughts. My mind was racing, and it was just the most terrible, hopeless feeling that just came over my body in an instant. Well, I made it into the parking and into the apartment complex, made it into my parking stall. And for these next 3 hours at home, I'm just praying, I'm pacing, I'm walking down back and forth. I'm trying to calm myself down. But the thoughts kept rushing faster and faster. The sweat kept profusely sweating. And I got this overwhelming sensation as I'm going to die. I don't know what's going on here. Thank God that there was a hospital. The local hospital is about a mile down the street from us. So I drove to the hospital and I walked in. It was probably 1 o'clock in the morning, the hospital. I walked into the emergency room and it was empty, but one lady sitting in the waiting room. I walked up to the desk where you admit yourself, and the lady at the desk says, "How can I help you?" The only words that came out of my mouth were, "I'm getting married in 3 days." And the lady in the corner in the waiting room started busting up laughing uncontrollably. I didn't know. In my mind, I thought I was just going to die. So they brought me into emergency room and they put suction cups on my forehead and suction cups on my chest and hooked me up to some monitors, and came out about 30 minutes later. And the doctor says that the good thing is you're not dying. The bad thing is that whatever has gotten you into this mess of coming here is that your body is simply shut down. I don't know what's gotten you into this mess. I don't know what life looks like for you, but you hit this tipping point of your body, your emotions, And all that maybe life is facing is now hit this tipping point to where now you've gone beyond your body's threshold to manage all of this. So I had this defining moment there in that hospital room, and she says that you're going to have two choices when you leave here. Either A, that you are on medication in low doses of antidepressants and Zoloft for the rest of your life, or that you leave here today making some decisions on how you're going to manage life. And I don't know what that looks like for you, but you've got to get your life back into this doable place. And so at that moment, I knew that I had some changes to make, and I was sitting there for probably an hour or whatever, and I just realized I'm going to get married in 3 days. Is this what I want to take into a marriage? Is this sustainable for my future? And everything that I loved about ministry, I didn't have the right boundaries. I didn't have I just thought that just I came to the end of realizing that making people happy for the rest of my life isn't sustainable and isn't going to be sustainable for a healthy marriage. And I would wish that I love to tell you that I walked out of that hospital and I made radical changes and my life instantly changed. That wasn't the case, but I did leave with a new perspective. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, I began to slowly turn that ship around to get into a better place. And I come to the realization that pleasing people is not the same as leading people. You can walk away with anything from our talk today is that pleasing people is not the same as leading people. So I look on the screen today, and you might be watching here a little bit later, but as a leader and a creative, you can never make everyone happy, or you're setting yourself up for failure just like I did. You can never make your spouse happy all the time. You can never make your boss happy. And that's not our responsibility to make everyone happy. So to be a good team member, to be a good leader, to be a good department leader, to be a good spouse, is it requires that we ask the best of every person. We have to challenge and we have to ask the best of every person. So we have to come from the perspective, if we're going to become healthy leaders, and not be led by pleasing people, but by leading and challenging people in a healthy way, is this constant fight to overcome the right perspective of doing what's right over feeling what's right. Doing what's right over feeling what's right. Because emotions are important. They are our indicators. If we're sad, it's an indicator that we're grieving. If we're angry, it's indicator that we're passionate about something. We're passionate for righteousness. We're passionate for the right thing. We're passionate that we need to be heard, right? But our emotions, they make great indicators, but they make horrible leaders. And our feelings make horrible leaders, although they're validated. We need to choose that perspective to be healthy leaders. Is it doing what's right, as opposed to doing what our feelings determine what's right for us? So I'm going to share with you today, I'm going to share with you three shifts to moving from pleasing people to challenging people, from pleasing people to challenging people in a healthy way. So I would just like to pause there and just to ask the question, and Libby, if you would do me a favor and drop this question in the ArtSpeak U channel, is if you have fought that tension of being a people pleaser yourself, what I guess what was a negative, what was the negative, what are the negative perspectives of that? Pleasing people, right? It feels good. It was sustainable for a little bit. But what have you seen maybe in your life, or how many of you that you're not a people pleaser, but you are you are around people pleasers. You are around somebody that maybe reports to you or part of your department. But yeah, I see that there's that tension to manage, that they struggle. They're challenged by that. Well, I would say yes, on both sides of the coin, right? We're all learning and growing in our leadership capacity. And I see that sometimes in client work, I see that in life in general. But the question that I would just ask, if you want to take some time to write a response, is whether you've seen somebody, you've observed people pleasing, that maybe that's something that you struggle with. What is the downside that you've seen? I've shared a little bit of my journey, but what's that downside? People pleasing. Should probably get in that channel, shouldn't I?
did you want us to answer here or in the?
I would say, I mean, you can just do both. I would say if you want to
Sure.
share, but if you could drop it in as well. I'm still trying to pull that up. So, oh, here we go. Yes, love just for a couple people to share. You could share on this call, drop in the comment, but just I love one or two people to share live on the call would be great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
I did this early on in my time in my ministry as well, and it was one thing that always surprised me was like at the end of the day, there was nobody there to tell me to take care of myself other than me caring about taking care of myself. And so when I talk to other people about this or younger ministers, one thing I'll use the analogy when you're on a plane and they tell you if the cabin pressure drops, the mask will drop out of the ceiling, and then they always tell you if you're traveling with children, who do you put them on first? And 99% of the time, people always say, well, you put them on your kids first. And I say, okay, now think about it for a second. Is that really what they say? And they stop and they go, oh, wait a minute. They tell you to put it on yourself first. And I'm like, why? Because if you don't take care of yourself, your kids have no hope, right? And so you can't help them if you yourself are passed out. And so the same thing is true in ministry and really any other aspect of life is if you don't take the time to take care of yourself, you're no good to anybody else. And so early in my ministry time too, that was one thing I learned is that my leadership diminishes quickly and my influence diminishes quickly amongst others because that's what leadership is, right? It's influence. If you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not leading by example, if they don't see you being a healthy, they don't see you. And I know there's seasons that are busier than others, but if they don't see you being intentional with taking care of yourself, that's a bad precedent, but it also diminishes influence of people. And at the end of the day, you're out there, but nobody's following. You know, it's like you're leading a parade that nobody's in. And so that's why I always like Jeremy, one thing that we had talked about even is making sure that you block off those times on your calendar that is clear that this is time that I need to do this. And that can't be interrupted because if I don't do that, nobody else will do it for me. And so we have to be intentional in taking care of our health that way too. So no, I'm finally, for me personally, I'm at the point where I always say this, I care about what people think, just not enough to do something about it. And so I kind of want to be in that middle place where I don't want to lose empathy for what people feel or think or how it might be coming across. But what I don't want to do is have that adjust all of my behavior simply because somebody has an opinion. And so I care enough what people think, but just not always enough to do something about it. That's kind of where I like to fall.
That's really good, Shannon. I love what you said specifically. I resonated with on the front end of your comment is nobody else is going to watch out for your health. And as a young leader, somebody will tell me when enough is enough. Somebody will tell me when Jeremy, we're pleased with you. You're doing a great job. You can stop. But I felt like because there wasn't a mentor or somebody in my life, or you know, we know our limits better than anybody. So I think that we have to assume and take responsibility for our health because nobody else is. Nobody else. It's very unlikely that someone else is going to have that conversation with you. You know, to retract and to reframe things. But no, appreciate that perspective. Anybody else?
Early in my career, when I was just starting to be a manager, I wanted to be laid back and like, hey, and we were fortunate to have kind of a flexible schedule, but someone started really taking advantage of just always late, not showing up on time, not there. And I tried to be understanding and like, hey, let's just work on this and be a friend. But she wasn't improving, and it started setting a bad precedent for the rest of my team and my staff. And so then and then it's kind of like, well, it lets everybody just kind of do whatever they want. And there was no structure. And because I wanted her to be my friend. I wanted to please her and to have that like rapport, but there was not the healthy boundaries of the leadership side where it was like, hey, I'm not your friend first. In this role, my responsibility is to lead this team in this direction. So it just doesn't set yourself up well when you're supposed to be setting an example. It leads to contradictions because you're making an exception over here to make this person happy and over here to make this person happy, and instead of just kind of having a healthy culture, having agreements of this is how we communicate with each other, this is what's expected, and walking in maturity. So that's kind of something I ran into.
That's good.
Yeah,
I think similar to that, like specifically what we do, but also I think generally I think one of the downsides of people pleasing is a lot of the clients that come to us, they're coming to us for consultation just as much as like production. They don't just want their ideas to be executed. They want to be given good ideas and consulted on best ways forward. And if we only people please, we actually do them a disservice, and we don't actually do that part of what we don't add that value to them in the way that they're hoping. We're missing out on a whole chunk of value. So that's like for a client relationship. But even like if you're hired to be a leader, those jobs can tend to be a little bit amorphous, because it's like, what tasks are you doing? But really, I think you're hired to help people, a team, individuals, whatever, find the best way forward. And if you only care about their satisfaction, their happiness, whether or not, they're happy with you, you're doing them a disservice and not helping them grow. Kind of like we were talking about, Libby. Like, I'm here to actually help this person achieve certain things and help people grow. And if I only people please, it's not just that they're missing out on value. They're missing out, and they're missing out on what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's kind of how I see it from the other side too. That's a downside for them if all we do is if we're just yes men, and we're just, hey, what do you want to do, and we'll do it, and we don't say, hey, here's a thought, did you consider this, and just kind of push back a little bit. They're missing out on value, really, that they probably are hoping for from you anyway. The reason you're there.
Yeah, I can build on that one for sure, because
Sure.
I think like we'll be talking about a subordinate, and wanting I want them to be happy. I want them to maybe even like me. I think that's leading up the opposite way. I think what Ryan's getting at, like, you can waste a lot of time helping your boss or a superior develop what is objectively a bad idea. And you can waste a lot of resources, and you can waste a lot of other people's time, and you can waste a lot of money by like, well, it's their idea, so it has extra weight, and not just being honest and leading up. And if you're on a team, I think you're on it because of what you bring to the table, especially in a creative, space. So if you have criticisms, especially like data-backed criticisms, or like, hey, I've seen this, experience-backed criticisms of an idea, not that you want to be hostile or like, this idea is bad, boss, but here's why. I think that's probably, like, for me, the last vestige and holdout of people pleasing is like the lizard brain element of like, I can't tell a superior or someone who's like someone who's bankrolling my like career in a sense, that an idea is bad. And I've had to overcome that hurdle several times to avoid investing a lot of like budget, resources, whatever, in what wasn't a great idea and was not going to have a yield a result, and not, ultimately just waste a lot of time and money. So, and leading up can be scary, but I think it's definitely worth it if you do it with empathy and grace.
Those are really good perspectives. And matter of fact, I'm going to cover definitely what you just said, Mark and Ryan, and just some points and kind of wrapping some of the stuff up. So really, really appreciate it. Just muted myself. So appreciate it. Really, really good perspectives. And so a couple things I want to share. I want to share 3 things today. I think really 3 shifts to start gravitating towards being a people-pleasing leader to actually being a leader, challenges people in a healthy way and leads in a healthy way. First one is, we have to change our perspective. Change our perspective of really what a leader is. Sometimes it's that perspective change. And so my perspective in those early years of leadership had been self-preservation. What is best for me? What is best for me? How can I get these people to like me again, right? How can I work more? How can I earn their approval? How can I appease people? How can I accommodate people? Is a perspective that I had earlier on as a leader that led me into that really difficult situation in a couple of years. So I had to change my perspective as a leader. And I heard this quote one time. I don't even know who to give it credit to, but the quote was, respect is often earned on the most difficult ground. Respect is often earned on the most difficult ground. Think of David, right? In the valley, calling out Goliath, and the respect to hear in that day was on the difficult ground, right? some of the respect that you're going to earn as a leader, or I earned as a leader at that time, was on difficult ground. It was pushing back and thinking through, not from what's best for me, but what is best for, here's how to change that perspective. I'll kind of give you three perspectives to kind of filter your leadership through when you're thinking through making decisions. You face that tension. Is number one, what's the best for the organization that I'm serving? Could be your church, could be your agency, could be whoever you work for. In this situation, what's the best for the organization? Where are we headed? What's our mission? What are we called here to do here? What's the best to keep that moving forward in a healthy way? Number two, what's the best for the people in the organization and slash our clients, right? If it's an internal client, external client, what's the best for the organization? What's the best for the people within the organization? Number three, what's best for me? But I started putting it in that priority, then that helps me definitely have opportunities to have those difficult ground opportunities where respect was earned. And I realized that pushing back, and some of that pushback was with my senior pastor. I'm gonna have to, now that I'm married in a different season, what I just went through, I'm gonna have to say no to some certain things. Gonna have to frame in some boundaries that's gonna allow me to lead really well at home, to continue to lead well in the organization. Meant that I'm gonna have to raise up some people that I couldn't do and be, and expectations of me to be everywhere, but I had to position and delegate and release not only tasks, but I had to release authority. I had to release people that could make decisions that were good for the organization, good for the people within the organization, and good with how I was called to lead and make sure that things were taken care of. And so it's best for the organization, what's best for the people, and then thirdly, what's best for me. And so once I filtered it through that perspective, it really helped clarify my motives. It really helped make sure that my motives were pure and how that I led. And so as people begin to push back, certain people didn't like it. I began to ruffle some feathers. Some people didn't want to serve in my department. Some people just maybe didn't think of me the same way. But over time, when we are able to have those healthy, challenging questions that pulls the best out of people and call people to rise up, call people to take responsibility, call people to grow as leaders as we're co-partnering with whatever organization we're a part of, is that it begins to change the shift of the culture, and you actually get the respect of the people, and you get greater influence when you do pushback. How many of you have a leader in your life that is a pushback leader, that's confident, that has no issue at all challenging you? Or people in your, okay, think about it this way. Think about a defining moment in your journey as a leader, is growing as a creative. How many of you were challenged by a leader that caused you to rise up, to pull more out of you, to expect more of you, that maybe held you accountable, that saw more of what you saw, that helped you push through what you push, helped maybe point out some things that you needed to change so you can grow? How many of you have those people in your life, or have people in those life currently? How many of you have a great level of respect for those individuals? And in the moment, it didn't feel like it. And that moment, it may have felt like, who do you think you are? Like, I mean, you can't talk to me like that. Like, really? Like, it maybe didn't feel good at the beginning, and maybe there's some internal pushback, if not some external pushback on that. But how many of you are thankful for that somebody cared enough to say the hard things, to challenge you in a way, but you knew that because they loved you? So those are the kind of leaders that we want to be. Those are the kind of leaders that we want to be when we're facing our clients, facing our team, and outside of what life looks like outside of this call. And so point number two is that value people as much as you value yourself. Value people as much as you value yourself. And for me, if I really to peel back the layer of my soul in that time and going through some different processes to get really healthy in my soul, was to realize that a lot of this people pleasing and a lot of this was serving people. Yes, number one, it was the healthy perspective. I generally had a pure heart and a true heart, and I loved people, and I just didn't know how to love them in a healthy way as a leader. Number two, the unhealthy part is that I felt like maybe ministry was a whirlwind. I got saved at 19. I started serving day and night. I just loved it, loved the church, wanted to be a part. And I think some of that to me was out of the pureness of wanting to serve and be a part to help God's kingdom and help our local church. But also too, I think that it was trying to fill some holes of compensation that I just didn't feel adequate. I feel like, man, I was the only Christian in my household, in my house. I didn't know anybody. I didn't grow up in a church. I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I didn't grow up in the lineage of my great grandfather was a Christian and I'm passed on the baton of ministry and had this lineage and almost like prepared for it. So I felt like I had to overcompensate because what I brought to the table as Jeremy in those early years, it wasn't enough. So if I felt like if I could do everything and please everybody, so part of that was the trying to compensate for my inadequacy. That do I really feel? I mean, I felt like getting in the wine press, right? Or and so I just had to learn to go into the strength in which he'd given me, not in my own strength. And so number two is value people as much as you value yourself. And sometimes if we go back and think of maybe some difficult situations of people pleasing, kind of look a little bit deeper. Sometimes it's a reflection on kind of how we think and feel about ourselves. So it'll translate into how we interact with other people. So I realized that if you feel you are worthy of an opportunity, you will give others opportunity. And sometimes I see insecure leaders, example, like the guy at church, he's been the drummer for 20 years. Nobody else can drum on a Sunday. He is the drummer. Nobody can touch that drum set. Nobody can volunteer to be another drummer. There's people at church, like they play the organ. Nobody else plays the organ. Nobody else plays the drum set. Nobody else creates graphics for our team. That is the untouchable. You can't give them any critical feedback. They own that spot. They were born for it. And you can only take it over if they die, right? And so some of that comes from, if you feel you are worthy of an opportunity, you will give others opportunity. If you feel like there's an adequacy, you're gonna preserve, you're gonna hold on, you're not gonna share, you're not gonna give credit, you're gonna hold on to everything you possibly can to give you validation. The second, if you feel that you are worthy of love, that you're gonna love others, right? Others that withhold love, others that don't express it, they don't share it, they don't share appreciation, that don't, and somehow share expressions of love. Well, I think that's, do you feel that you're worthy of love? And so another perspective is if that you give yourself grace, you'll do the same to others. So if you're hard on people, you demand from people that when people fall short, you're going to be the first one to criticize, first one to drag people through the mud and continue to call them at whatever cost, is that you might not be giving yourself grace. So I had to think through myself as a leader. If I really truly value myself, it's going to translate in the value that I have for people. And so we end up treating others how that we treat ourselves. So number three is that work to establish upfront expectations. And I tell you what, there's a couple situations in ArtSpeak where I did not set up that expectation. Maybe I wanted to please that client, right? And some of these situations that come back to bite, and it just wasn't realistic for our team. And my ability to set the right expectation and boundaries caused tension with the client, caused tension with our team. Marriage, right? You don't set up the right expectations. You definitely don't want to upset a wife who's from Detroit. She will definitely call you out on that. So three is work to establish upfront expectations. I worked here's what I realized. I worked really hard relationally and with relational equity, but those people had to guess on all the other things. What I expected, they had to make some assumptions. Jeremy's a great guy. He's gonna be fun to work with. I have no clue what he expects of me, though. He hasn't really set those up. And so assumptions will always cause more problems in the long run. And I don't know if you realize this, but people always assume the worst, or they will always assume the complete opposite of what you expect, right? Given an assignment with assumptions made, it's never going to be assume how you want it done. It's always going to be on the opposite spectrum. I don't know why that is in life. It's every time assumptions are, from my communication, people assumed it was always completely opposite of what I wanted them to do. So number three is work to establish your upfront expectations. And so we give you a couple sub points here. Is upfront appreciation places value on the person, and it increases their perceived value. So on the upfront, hey, we appreciate this partnership. We appreciate, number one, we appreciate the input. We appreciate your help here. Appreciate what you're bringing to the project. Number two, expectation makes everything better when everything's clear on what's expected. When there's clarity, and you know what that clarity looks like, then you know what's expected. Number three is upfront decisions increase the value of people's time. So if you're able to make decisions and able to move the ball, I think everybody on here is frustrated with decisions that aren't being made and meetings that happen and the balls aren't moved. And I think if we're working with external clients, what is the next step to make a decision? Next step to move forward? What is that one thing that we need to do to give that confidence? So upfront decisions increase the value of people's time. So if you're meeting with people one-on-one, what is the meeting about? What are we trying to accomplish on this meeting? What's one decision that we need to make today that's going to help set the expectation, set the boundaries, set the timeline? It could be with you and your senior pastor, it could be you and an external client, it could be with you and your spouse. We're meeting because of this, and we are going to work towards making a decision. I'm going to expect the best out of myself. I'm going to expect the best out of you. We're going to challenge each other to grow and move in the direction that is best for the household, that's best for the organization, that's best for the church. And so how many of you, can anybody on this call think of a situation where you didn't set an expectation up front and it just caused chaos, or caused maybe the outcome you didn't bring the right outcome? Think of an expectation or an assumption, or maybe it could be this, an assumption that you've made or an assumption that others have made in a decision, and it caused the project to go off, caused the situation to go awry because there wasn't a clear expectation. And then we'll let X in mind.
I could think of a lot of meetings that that we've walked away from, like in my ministry time, and staff weren't quite clear on, okay, so we talked about everything in theory, but how does that translate into action? And so then they would assume that I don't care what they do, and so they kind of define their own wins. And then when they assumed that I didn't care how they did it, then they assumed I just didn't care about them. And so it just led, like Jeremy, like you said, bad assumptions, came to wrong conclusions. And so bringing that clarity was a really big thing that I had to learn early on. Okay, how are we all hearing this, and what are we taking away from this, so we know the action steps to move forward? And so that was something that I had to kind of add to high-level meetings, so we knew how to do things too.
Sure, that's great. I appreciate it. Who else? They've been in a situation where there's been assumptions, and because there was assumed and the expectations weren't clear, that it set the situation up for failure, not success. Well, Libby, if you wouldn't mind writing that in the channel, that would be a good one to respond to after the video. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you're watching this a little bit later, some assumptions have been made on your team, something outside of your organization, but it's affected the overall outcome because an assumption has been made. I was going to kind of wrap up with a thought here today. If you guys have any questions, that's great. I definitely welcome that. If you're kind of navigating through, we can workshop here for a few minutes, but we definitely want to respect everyone's time today, and we'll land this plane early, if not before the bottom of the hour. But as we grow into maturity as creatives, as leaders, who's leading departments, who's leading volunteers, who's leading other people, leading in our marriages and relationships, as leaders, we see different perspectives, which is great. We understand and we know that. But when you lead a team, department, you even lead your family, we just need to remember and be cognizant of is that we need to keep our eyes on the big picture. What is the vision for what we're trying to accomplish, whether it is for a graphic, it's for a campaign, it's for a sermon series, it's for a direction the organization is going, it's starting a new initiative. It's where the family's headed on vacation this summer. As we keep our eyes on the big picture, remember we work backwards, is what's best in a situation, what is best for the organization? What is best for the people within the organization or the clients we serve? And then third and third and maybe more important is really what's best for me. Because if we lead what's best for me, we lead the tendency to please people. If we lead what's best for the organization, it allows us to lean in and with that calm confidence have some of those challenging questions and those pushback. And what both Shannon and Ryan said earlier in the call, I think is really important, is that especially with us at ArtSpeak, is that clients pay us to push back. They pay us to be challenged. They pay us to frame in the right perspective. And from our seat of expertise in working with hundreds of churches and dozens of clients currently of what's the best practices, what have we done that's proven itself to be a good pathway, and not just assuming the great idea that they have is going to be the best, but how can we collaborate in a way where the people on the team are felt and they're heard, but we work to bring forth what's the best result. And we know ArtSpeak is what's the best result in helping us help organizations reach more people. But before we jump today, just love if there's anything maybe you're working through with this particular aspect of leadership, or any questions or in situations of maybe you're in a specific point of situation now, might be stuck a little bit, trying to work on bringing through the best and not just an assumption the situation. Just love just to see if anybody has anything before we jump today.
Well, I was smiling really big because of expectations in my personal life and marriage. So yesterday, my birthday, and my husband's birthday was the 12th of July. And so there's just, he's a lot more laid back. He's like, hey, let's just do this. We don't have to do anything. I prefer to have celebration and to feel special and things like that. So we had communicated some of those things and it was good. But what was wild is we woke up early and I was going to the gym, but instead of saying happy birthday, it was, hey, I want to get to the gym by 5 o'clock. Are you going with me or not? And that was his greeting to me. And as a result, it spun out into a lot of, back and forth. And for me, I had to manage, I had to realize okay, hold someone, give somebody grace. It was just waking up early, but also, it made me realize hey, I need to communicate that part of what makes me feel loved, maybe not the night before or whatever, but hey, if I say I want you to feel celebrated and special on my birthday, and I want to feel like you're doing above and beyond, that might mean the little extras and these moments. And I want to feel like it's my day, and all of that. So it's just interesting because I had to take a step back, and it all worked out fine and quick and all that. But, just that even in I would say this is a really obvious thing that I didn't think I would have to make clear, but it never hurt. You shouldn't assume, and if there's certain things that are important to you, it helps those that love you, work with you and what's going to help you feel good in those moments or work through a hard situation. And so I don't know, it was just a funny personal experience with managing expectations, not assuming in the process. And I think that is so important in all of this.
No, that's good. And that could easily translate into a working relationship, right? Whether in a church, a nonprofit, in an agency life. I mean, we can definitely think through how that applies equally across the board to other situations for sure. I appreciate you sharing. Anybody else before we jump? Any experiences you guys are navigating through? Any situations that you guys want to share, and we can workshop it for a minute. We have a few minutes before our time's up today. Well, thank you for being a part of this call live. And for those that are going back through and watching that, go ahead and go to the ArtSpeak channel. We'll drop the link to this call here, and you can continue to add your comments and questions and interact. And we'll make sure that we continue to let this conversation live on. What I would love to cover maybe next time we circle back around, whenever that is how do we have the healthy, challenging conversations? We need to make that shift to being a people pleaser to being someone who really rises up and challenges of ourselves to be our best, and we challenge others to rise up and to be their best as well. How do we actually work that out when we're in those, when we face those conversations where we have opportunity to be on that tough ground, to really earn that respect and to lead well? We'll talk about that on another call, but appreciate you guys jumping in and all your contribution today, and we'll catch you on the next call. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.